Here's part 2 of our most recent Legal AI Live on LinkedIn. If you missed part 1, make sure to go to www.legalailive.com and subscribe to the new podcast or on any podcast app to catch part 1 and to not miss future episodes. Without further delay, here's part 2.
You know, I had a slide in my presentation for a while, one of my AI presentations, where I had asked one of the AIs, I can't remember, I think it was Llama, who is Ben Shore? And it had given me a very impressive paragraph of my accomplishments and what I had done and written and who I was, almost none of which was true. You know, it listed a couple of books it claimed I had written that I had not written. In fact, according to Amazon, nobody had written those books. Those books didn't exist. But they sounded like good books. I kind of wished I could read them. So I'm completely with you on that. And so yeah, I get it. It has gotten a little better though. In my most recent tests, you know, I audition different AIs all the time as part of my role, and I'll be doing that even more now, I guess. And I always do it by asking it questions I already know the answer to, because I want to see what it comes back with. And one of the examples that I've seen that I still see occasionally, so I'm a huge Columbo fan. Some people know that. And so one of the questions I ask the AIs when I'm auditioning them is Columbo married? And it's a question that's not uncontroversial among the Columbo fans, you know, the community. And I'm curious to see what the AIs respond with. And some of them get it right, and some of them don't. But the one that really stood out to me was one of the AIs, and I wish I could remember which one it was now. I think it might have been Meta's AI, but I'm not sure. Came back and said, Columbo is a widower and frequently wears a black band on his ring finger on the show as a memorial to his wife. That is not even remotely close. He doesn't wear a ring at all on the show. His wife, as far as we know, is still alive. Anyway, but what fascinated me about this, and this is kind of where you were going, I think, Dennis, what fascinated me about it is I'm enough of a fan that I've read most of the Columbo books, you know, that have been written about the show. I've seen every episode 40 times, of course. You know, I'm on the Facebook pages and the Reddit things, you know, and I've read most of the mainstream blogs about the show. I have never seen that theory. I have seen some really crackpot theories that Columbo was mentally ill and was imagining his wife, that his wife didn't like the I See Dead People movie, you know, like it was all a little hallucination. And anyway, I've seen like theories like that about her. I've never once heard a theory that he was a widower and wore a. So my thing is, where did the AI come up with that, right?
Well,
Because I
Ben,
have seen. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I understand that there are some AIs that bought into large databases that collected all kinds of random theories. For example, Reddit.
Okay.
You know all the wacky things that you hear out of or in Meta or whatever, and they gather all that data and they put it in, and it spews out, you know, the old garbage in, garbage out theory. And so, yeah, you're going to get a lot of wacko theories if the database that you're basing on has a lot of wacko things in it.
Sure.
Fan
And
fiction.
I have seen the AIs
it might have been fan
reply.
fiction.
What was that?
It might have been fan fiction, and like the AI like read some fan fiction. I mean, who
possible.
knows?
I mean, I've never seen that in fan fiction, but it's possible, sure. But yeah, I mean, I've seen the AIs respond that she was an imagination, you know, she was a hallucination, or I've seen, you know, but I get where it got that from because I have seen that theory occasionally. I think it's wrong, but I understand where you might have gotten that understanding. So anyway, it was just really interesting to see that particular hallucination that didn't seem to have any grounding that I could identify. Usually I can spot, okay, I think you're wrong, but or I see where you got that from. So anyway, that was just interesting.
This is why I like Notebook LM, because at least not yet has it given me any information outside of the sources that I've connected to a notebook when querying against a notebook.
Yeah.
Now, what I did do, interestingly, when doing this, when showing my father, who's in the insurance business, but he still like finds AI stuff interesting, even though he doesn't have a direct relationship in the insurance world. He said he's on like the sales side and like whole product, and it's not like he's not an adjuster. But, and Mark is joining us. So I had to let Mark in. Mark joined us last month. He said, well, can you ask it to like, can you ask in this interactive mode information that's not in the sources? I was like, well, that's a really good question. Like, I never thought to do that because like, I kind of don't want it to go outside the sources. But I did. I was asking it about like my podcasting for lawyers CLE. And I said, well, like, what are some other microphones or audio equipment that are not in the list that might be useful for lawyers? And it did. It gave me like a list of things. So like maybe like it can go outside the list. And it was accurate because I'm familiar with those the mics that it mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting to me that it does go outside the sources. But this is another reason why like I kind of like restricting the database that I'm querying against when leveraging these tools.
Yeah. In the Copilot world, SharePoint Copilot creates there's a when you have a SharePoint site and you have a Copilot license, you get SharePoint agents by
Mhm.
default. So it's an agent, it's a Copilot agent you can ask questions about, and it's grounded entirely and scoped entirely to that SharePoint site that you've got. And so if you've got a SharePoint file library, for example, for a particular matter, you can use that agent to ask questions about the materials that are in that SharePoint site, and it should be scoped only to that material, which should hopefully would significantly reduce any chance of any hallucinations.
Right. So let me go. I want to shift over a little bit to education, but I want to answer this question from Josh Maley, who asks whether I've worked with AI platforms and the like to run, his examples are hackathons or have students build out core legal use templates for a grade as part of the curriculum. And the answer to that is yes, in a number of ways. And I'll be sharing this, but I had, in my last AI and law class, we did 2 prompting projects. And the first one was to have the students early in the semester create an AI personal learning assistant. And it could be about anything that they wanted to learn. It could be for class, could be to help them make recipes, whatever. And then at the end of the semester, we did what I called a capstone AI prompting project. And again, I'm not talking about creating apps or anything. It was meant to be a complex prompt or series of prompts. And they did some really cool things. And, from somebody said, if you're not represented by a patent lawyer and you can't afford a patent lawyer, you could take your invention, describe it, and would put together claims for you and do other things like that, so that you on your own could make a decision whether you wanted to pursue that versus knowing that you had to pay $30,000, to even consider, filing a patent in terms of legal fees. But they were across the board in doing that. It was one of the most fun things we did in the class. I'm going to try to share at least the titles of those projects. And what I did in connection with each of them was I had them write like a page and a half reflection on their project, sort of what they learned, what they struggled with, what worked, how it changed as they hit roadblocks and stuff. It was fascinating to see that. And then the savviness, I'll call it, the sophistication and their comfort with prompting just went way, way up. And so I really like that. I'm going to continue doing that and do more of that. I haven't done this in class, but I have done things on my own where I use AI to simulate a design thinking event and then give me the results of it on something that I'm working on. So again, this is where I'm actually relying on the hallucination factor, right? I'm just saying, like, I want you to do this. I want you to come up with something that you think is the most likely results. Give me a diverse group, include these people, include customers, that sort of thing. And then give me, and I use this sort of in rank order notion in prompting, give me in rank order, like the 5 most important ideas that come out of this. And I'll use that as a starting point. I know if I ran that prompt again, I'd probably get 5 different things, but that's okay with what I'm doing. So I wouldn't necessarily do it as a hackathon because I'm working with law students, so they're definitely not coders, and we're not gonna go into the code world. But I have had students who, and one in particular, his prompting project really did result in code that he created in Python that he coded using ChatGPT, I believe. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for hands-on stuff. And to me, like, you learn prompting, you learn the limitations of AI hands-on when you do it. And that's why I think, to go back to the hallucination thing, I think if you've done like thousands of prompts and you've done all this stuff, that your sense of where it's going to hallucinate and where there are issues is going to start to be really sophisticated. And the idea that you're going to say, like, oh, here are these sites, I need to do the string site. And I know just somebody told me that they did this, that they had a string site and they had 2 cases and they thought it'd be good to have 3 or 4. So they just went to ChatGPT and had them add like another site or 2. And it not only hallucinated cases, it hallucinated a quote from a case they were really familiar with. And what she told me, which is really fascinating as a lawyer, is that her expertise is in legal research. And she said when she saw this quote in a case she was familiar with, it's like a seminal case that she didn't recognize, her immediate thing was like, oh my God, I'm getting old. I've forgotten like this important part of this case. Her reaction was not to say like, oh my God, the AI hallucinated this whole quote. And I need to check on that. But that's an interesting, that's how I look at hallucinations in a lot of ways.
I thought I'd get Ben before he had to jump, but he had to jump. I wanted to get him to say his takeaways, but that's okay. Next time, Ben. Next time. So I have an interesting thing. We come back to education, but for the practitioners on, so for Carolyn and for Gio, something interesting happened to me, and I'm curious to know if it's happened to you yet. Is I was doing an intake call with a potential client, and I asked her how she found out about me, and it turns out she was drafting in ChatGPT a non-standard agreement for her situation, and ChatGPT suggested, you might want to talk to a lawyer about this. And she said, sure, how about you suggest some for me? And it gave her a list of attorneys, and I was in the list, and she reached out. So really interesting that happened. Has anything like that happened to the other practitioners on the call?
It hasn't happened to me, but I know that there is a lot of concern. I posted an article on LinkedIn about how your target client is no longer a human, it's potentially an AI agent. And so you have to start thinking about how to optimize your profile online so that ChatGPT will pick up on it. And I've been to some recent talks about how you go from being number one on Google to being number one on ChatGPT. And apparently, Matt, you have mastered that.
I mean, I don't know, just do a lot of podcasting and guest and public speaking and host that on the internet somewhere. And she was also in Illinois, like she was in my licensed jurisdiction. So like ChatGPT found a lawyer near her. It was like the Google equivalent of Googling lawyer near me, but it was in ChatGPT. Really fascinating.
And that really solves a problem that a lot of people have. Is there's like, how do you find, even as a lawyer, like, so you say like, I need to have somebody help me with this divorce case, and you go like, yeah, I don't know anybody, right? Or like, or you try to ask questions to figure out how to help them, and it becomes really difficult. You say, well, maybe in its own way, AI can help a little bit, to at least do some kind of first level screening on that to reduce the potential pool on that.
Can we flip it around and use it to find clients?
Find clients near me?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. So I would say that, because yesterday I was doing this thing where I said, oh, I'm thinking about doing some fundraising for the center at MSU. What are the types of people who would be good donors? What are the types of groups? What are the types of characteristics they have? If we, and then I went so far as to say, like, suggest people in Michigan, right, to at least give me a starting point. And
what agent did you use for that?
I just did. That was just, I don't know. I'm sort of, it's not even ambidextrously anymore. It's like I go between Google Gemini in various flavors and Claude and ChatGPT. So I couldn't tell you which one I did it in. Probably it was Claude, because the most simple things I do in Claude. But it was interesting to get an idea of that. And then, sometimes when we talked about this in class, if you say, if I want to start like a niche practice, like one of the things I want to know is to get a sense of like, is there a market out there, and who might be in that market and what they might be looking for. And you see some of that with the AI, where you go like, well, okay, what might be out there if I, if I want to create this practice just for laundromats, like how many laundromats are in this area? What are the typical legal issues? Like, how might I get in front of these people? I could see AI being really helpful to give you a really big kickstart on deciding whether there's a potential niche market. And then you would go like, oh, and then is this a market that makes sense for a subscription model, right? Because sort of intuitively, it seems like it would, but maybe AI could help you flesh that out, flesh out the marketing message. So I can definitely see some things that you would do there, but it becomes as this guy in Australia, who I think is really good on this stuff, Ross Dawson, has this notion of humans plus AI. But I think that the real thing here is say, like, can this give me off to a jump start? And then I come in as the human and then start using the AI as a thought partner and decide what it can help me do and what it's not so good at doing. And at the end, I end up with something better than what I did when I started, which is the classic, I started with the classic blank piece of paper and some idea,
Yeah.
So.
I just, as an aside, has anybody used Harvey AI?
I wish.
No, and I have a bone to pick with them. I have reached out 3 times for a demo. They won't even let small firm lawyers touch it.
Yeah. I've had the same experience, Carolyn. I've reached out at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Oh,
Harvey's
wait, but didn't I see something this morning? They're looking to raise another $1 bazillion. So
they can raise their bazillion and just serve big firms is what they're thinking. So
I guess, it seems like such a small market, but hey, they're smarter than we are, right? So they're the ones getting the money. They're the ones getting the $1 billion, not us. So
They're the ones settling for $1 billion in legal services.
Yeah. So since we've already sort of gone off the rails here, I will say I was thinking about announcing this at the start of the show, but I didn't want to lose anybody who's live here today, because the whole point is there were 2 questions asked live, and it helped guide the conversation. That's the point of you, if you're listening to this later, joining us live, but you could still put comments in LinkedIn and we'll respond later. But this is now a podcast. So as it turns out, past events are hard to find on LinkedIn because it's not designed for that, right? The algorithm might share it for like 30 days or so. So I am like, if you don't want to hear us do our ums and ahs or dead air, that's all I'm taking out of this, because AI does that with the click of a button. And it's on YouTube at youtube.com/@LegalAILive and LegalAILive.com. It's powered by Substack. And I'm just publishing them whenever they're ready after we go live. I'm not really doing any editing or curating whatsoever because I don't have time for that. But folks have asked me, well, can I listen to a previous episode? And so I'm sending them like a LinkedIn link, like a LinkedIn URL. And it's like not a friendly way to do it, but it's also on all the podcast apps. So it's on Spotify. If you want to watch it on video, YouTube, LegalAILive.com and Spotify, you could watch it on video. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's everywhere. So just so folks know, if they want to listen to past episodes, which I listened to, like to make sure it worked, it's really interesting. So I highly recommend you go back and people listen to those past episodes.
As
the
long as you
AI
don't
editing thing is really cool.
as you don't use it to fall asleep at night. But
Only when you're talking, Gio, not when the rest of us are talking. No, I'm just.
So I wanted to touch on one more thing that is a place I used AI to kind of chase down some ideas. But seeing this past week, a number of states proposing pretty comprehensive ethics rules on AI. Okay. And I have a couple reactions. So one is they don't relate anything at all to what the ABA has done or what other states have done in order to keep things super confusing. A lot of times they seem to be talking about versions of AI as it was a year or more ago and not what we see now. And then what I experimented with AI was, I said, what if I want to comply with these proposed rules? How much would it cost me to comply? And can I be certain that I've complied with the rules so I won't be disciplined? And it's, the answer is no, of course. But can I be like reasonably confident? And I was asking to estimate the costs and break down the costs. And for the costs are thousands and thousands of dollars, education, tools, other things that you need to do, transparency, all this stuff. And I had AI just, as an expert, break down some of those things. And you could be talking, if you're in a small firm, like $50,000 to say, like, I'm going to comply with the rules, the ethics rules of this state, which don't make any sense, probably. If you're in, a state that's what I call a border state, where you're practicing in a couple of states, then you're doubling that at least, and you're going to have inconsistencies probably. And then the ABA rules of 512 is different than those as well. So I don't really know like what we're doing here for the practicing lawyer to say, here are these things, AI bad, you need to do something about it. Go learn it, like do all this due diligence, do this training, do this other stuff, and spend hours and hours of your time doing this for something that we have no confidence we're going to actually be in compliance with the ethics rules. So that's my sermon for today. But I'm curious what other people are thinking as they see these ethics rules come out, that to me, practicality just doesn't come into play.
Well, if practicality came into play, you would have AI take the first 30 decisions and just come up with one instead of having them parrot each other over and over again. It's typical of technologies. Like Nicole Black always has said, when the new technology comes on the scene, there's always this drive for disclosure. When people first started using the cloud, everybody was all about disclosure, which I advocated against because I knew it was a sham. I knew it would never be enforced. And it just made lawyers look stupid. It was like, we're disclosing that we're using the cloud, but we can't guarantee it's safe. So you, client, better be careful if we, put the stuff up there. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just so typical of lawyers. And again, I think you have the people on the ethics committees who aren't using these tools and don't understand how they work. I think you just have to trust lawyers to exercise their judgment and abide by the ethics rules as they've done when all types of other new technology has come on the scene. It's just overkill, and we clearly have not learned the lessons of the past 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years, I guess.
Yeah, I was reminded of Florida came out with this rule, back, in the Stone Age about Microsoft Word and metadata. And so their rule was basically that as a lawyer, you shouldn't have the setting in Microsoft Word that showed your metadata ever turned on, because you could accidentally see what somebody else had sent you. And I'm like, well, wait a second, like, what level of micromanagement are we talking about here? And the reason I have this setting on is so that I don't send stuff out that still has metadata in it. So like, in what world does this level of micromanagement make sense where you're telling me, like, in the version of Word that I'm using, I have to turn on or turn off certain settings? Like, I don't know, what does that have to do with ethics, right? So I don't know. Matthew, Gio, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, and then we'll sort of do it around the horn and wrap up.
The only thing I have to say about that is I know of a lawyer, and I'm not going to spoil what he's doing, but he's compiling all of these into like a RAG bot so that he's going to have a product that you could just query against it if you wanted to subscribe for a reasonable monthly fee. And it's not me. I'm not like being cagey there. Like, it's not me. It is another lawyer who I've talked to about who's like doing stuff with ethics there. And the only ethics thing that I'm paying attention to is in Illinois right now. We're about to, in July, we have a new ethics rule, Rule 300, where this is how lawyers work. 2 years ago, Illinois changed our rules on fees to allow explicitly for alternative fees. But then lawyers didn't use them because they didn't think they could collect on it in court. So we had to form a whole new rule, Rule 300, where now it explicitly says, okay, you could collect on, like, you're allowed to, you don't have to have track time to go and collect. So those are the ethics rules I'm paying attention to.
Okay, so let's wrap up with saying, what is it in AI you're looking forward to trying next month?
So I never got around to playing with Belt AI, and it's been a month. You sign up for a demo sometimes and it's free and you didn't actually spend any money, and it's a 90-day demo and you're like, oh, I've still got 60 days to demo that. So hopefully this time I'll get around to Belt AI, which promises to just read my email using AI and put to-do items on the calendar. So fingers crossed, maybe next month I'll have something to report on that.
Cool. What about you, Carolyn?
I'm looking forward to trying to replicate some of the hallucinations and also do some more work on Claude projects and see if I can set up a project to respond to discovery requests, see how that works.
Cool. Gio?
I'm focused on just trying to keep my head above water in the world of AI. Thinking ahead to next month, I'm having a hard time just keeping up with what I'm doing right now. I'm constantly amazed and how fast this stuff is coming out at us, new stuff all the time. And I went to Legal Tech in April, and that stuff is old now. It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been joking with people, especially practicing lawyers, where I say, I have this big project for the summer. And then I say, wait, doesn't everybody get the summer off once grades are turned in? But I do have a big AI project, which I'm not going to go into detail, but it's a pretty significant. Well, I'll use this term digital twin just to make it interesting. But I'm looking at Notebook LM and then bridging some stuff out into what I think is going to be Wolfram AI, which is a more mathematical, chart-oriented, pattern-oriented, much more sophisticated AI tool. And seeing what ways I might be able to use that. And that's, part of the reason I pulled in all my old blog posts and articles and other things like that. So that will give you a sense of where that's going. So that's what we have. And it was great for Ben to join us. Definitely reach out to Ben. He can say what he couldn't. It's really unfortunate that, Microsoft made some decisions to lay off thousands of people. But I think, Ben is going to be back in the world of legal tech, I'm sure, and is really a tremendous resource for all of us. So unfortunate in some ways, but potentially really, really good for the community in other ways as well, kind of once he gets past, where things are right now and moves on to the next thing. So Matt, if you have any wrap up administrative things.
Yeah,
stuff
so
like that.
I took care of that earlier. LegalAILive.com. We're not monetizing because this is not meant to be that. So it's just free to subscribe. If you want an email with the whenever we get these episodes published, if you can't join us live. Looking ahead, realizing that we changed the calendar, we changed it last time. So never promise these things, but just if we keep this going on the second Friday or the middle Friday of the month, let's call it the middle Friday of the month. That will be June 13th. We'll be back, everybody. So with that, I will people can sign off, but I have to keep it going for 20 more seconds so this part doesn't get cut off from LinkedIn. So
Thank you for
thanks, everyone.
inviting me.